Hola, this is Diana from Latin American/Mexican Spanish, and in today's short lesson, we are going to talk about relative pronouns. This is one of those advanced levels that tends to be a bit difficult. It is not if you keep in mind this table. In this table, you can see more or less the equivalents in English for the relative pronouns that we are going to practice today. And the only confusing part might be that there are a few relative pronouns that are the same in English, but in Spanish it can be in two different categories. For example, who. You can see that who is translated as what, but also as quién in different contexts. And today you are going to know all these tiny differences and you are going to be a master in relative pronouns. Before we continue, it's important to clarify what is a relative pronoun. Why do we bother learning this? Why is this relevant? So basically, a relative pronoun helps you connect sentences. It helps you to connect a main clause with a subordinate clause. What does it mean? When you have a bit of a complex sentence, the main sentence is going to express the general idea. It's going to contain the subject, and the subordinate clause is going to be not necessarily a complement, but definitely depends on the main idea. So the idea of a pronoun, it's literally to avoid repetition. And if you have already mentioned the noun in another part of the sentence, there is no point to repeat again, so you only use a pronoun instead. Let's see. I really try to don't be so technical and grammatical in the lessons, but this short explanation is necessary. Do you know what it is, a restrictive sentence? And do you know what is the difference with a non-restrictive sentence? It is very easy. Those words are just terminology. What I want you to understand is the difference between those two, because that is going to tell you when you use que and when you use quién. So the example is, I see a tall man. He is talking to a student. Here we have two short, simple sentences. How do we connect these two sentences in one? We need a relative pronoun for this. For example, I see a tall man who is talking to a student. Can you see? So now all of these examples are in English. It is your turn to make the translation in Spanish. If you are seeing this video that is quite advanced, you must be able to translate a sentence like this with no problem. So I would ask you to please leave this translation in the comments. So now let's talk about the restrictive and non-restrictive sentences. Restrictive sentences only show essential information. There is no pause in the ideas, there is no commas, it's just the same general idea altogether. Now let's talk about non-restrictive sentences. They clearly have commas, they emphasize a pause, and they need to clarify that there is more than one idea being expressed in here. It's in these kind of sentences where you need a more specific relative pronoun. In the restrictive sentences, you pretty much all the time are going to use que. That is the most common relative pronoun, and you use it to link ideas that are very clear and simple. We are going to be focused mostly in the non-restrictive sentences. Here we have an example of a restrictive sentence. Rompí un vaso que era caro. I'm highlighting que in this case because it's establishing a connection of two ideas that are very simple and they are very clearly connected. What is the translation in English? Exactly. I broke a glass that was expensive. Can you see how in this case we are translating que as that That is because this is a restrictive sentence. Now, let's see how it works with a non-restrictive sentence. This novel, which has beautiful illustrations, is a bestseller. Now, I'm giving you the sentence in English. Could you please leave the translation in Spanish in the comments? You can pause the video, you can do it. I will give you some time and then you can come back and check if your answer was correct. Welcome back. Let's check if your answer was right. So, the translation is: Esta novela, la cual tiene ilustraciones hermosas, es un bestseller. What can we see here? We are using la cual as the relative pronoun in this sentence because this is a non-restrictive sentence. How do we know that? It has two commas, and basically if you take the information in the commas out, the sentence makes sense anyway. That is additional information. We are establishing very clear pauses. And the ideas are not unrelated, but you can clearly separate that info. And this is something that doesn't happen with a restrictive sentence where everything needs to be there for the sentence to make sense. For this video, we are only going to study the relative pronoun que. We will have an independent one where we talk about los cuales, el que, quién, quiénes, and all the other ones. José Luis es una persona que ayuda a sus amigos. What is the translation of that in English? José Luis is a person that helps his friends. Please tell me if this is a restrictive or a non-restrictive sentence. If you say restrictive, you are correct. Now, in sentences where you also use who, but that are non-restrictive, in Spanish, we have a preference for use quien instead. Of course, that in both cases, you need to be talking about people, because otherwise you wouldn't be using who. For restrictive sentences, we translate who as que, but in non-restrictive sentences, we translate who as quién. For example, muchos de los soldados que murieron en esa batalla fueron enterrados aquí. How would you translate that in English? Many of the soldiers who died in that battle were buried here. We are using que in this example. Now, let's see how it works in a non-restrictive sentence. Marta, quien fue alumna mía, ha ganado un premio literario. We know it is a non-restrictive sentence because it has commas, it has pauses, and you can basically take out the information in the commas and the sentence still makes sense. I'm just emphasizing and giving extra information by saying that Marta was my student. Now, how would you say that in English? Marta, who was a student of mine, won a literary prize. Can you see how in my two examples you are using the relative pronoun who in English? However, in Spanish, we can translate who as que or as quién, and it all depends if the sentence is restrictive or non-restrictive. If you would like to get access to plenty of examples like this, I highly suggest you to visit our website and go to the section of relative pronouns. There you will find examples, exercises, and tons of materials that are going to help you master this topic. Don't forget that you can also book a one-to-one private session where I can help you with any problem that you might have about the Spanish language. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Muchas gracias. Adiós.